Okay, hi. So today I'm going to be talking about a reading project that I'm going to be doing in 2025. If I look at my reading statistics, a majority of what I read is US centric. That is in my fiction and in my nonfiction. And so I don't know if I've talked about it before on this channel, but I want to read more fiction from around the world, specifically classics from around the world. And I want to diversify my nonfiction reading as well to learn about things outside of the US centric gaze. And so I've kind of thought about that without putting a ton of intention behind it, and it hasn't really happened. And I think that's because the world is very large and I need to reduce my focus a little bit. So for the year of 2025, I am going to have a focus on reading books from Africa. I picked Africa as my starting point because I have been collecting from the African Writers series basically every time I go to used bookstores. In case you're wondering what things from the African Writer series looks like, it changes over time, and so they kind of always have this orange on the top, but these are some iterations of it. So I have a little over 30 books on this list, and I'm going to kind of go around the continent and talk about different books. I try to get a mix of countries and genres, and then my primary focus was that the author was like born and raised in Africa. Although I will say, with a decent amount of the nonfiction, it's not the case. That was just generally harder to find. Without, I think, further ado, I'm just going to get into this. So I'm going to go through first the books that are not like country specific. They're mainly nonfiction, generally about Africa. But the first one I'm talking about isn't even nonfiction. This is a fantasy. It is Africa Risen, a new era of speculative fiction. This is an anthology of short stories. This one specifically has authors from Africa and authors from the African diaspora, so across the globe in the US, etc. So I enjoy fantasy a lot. There's a lot of authors that wrote in this anthology that I've never read from before, so I'm excited to dive into this. Moving on to the nonfiction, we have Africa's World War, Congo, the Rwandan genocide in the making of a continental catastrophe. Boko Haram, the history of an African jihadist movement. Fever, Feuds, and Diamonds, Ebola, and the Ravages of History, and How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Okay, another one that I have that falls into this category is They Came Before Columbus, the African Presence in Ancient America. This one I debated putting on the list because I've seen people or seen reviews of it where people say it's not really sourced that well, but I'd like to read it for myself, I guess, and make that decision. Okay, so now we're going to go country by country. This is clearly using delineations from a modern context of country lines. So we're going to start in the north and kind of work our way west and then east and then south. We're going to start in Morocco, and the first one I own is The Curious Case of Dassoukins Trousers. This is a short story collection. I've had a poke around through it, and it looks like it's pretty humorous. I was kind of trying to find humor in these because a lot of the classics are very much about colonialism and how imperial rule or colonial rule changed culture or clashes with culture, or like cultures are having an identity crisis, which can be heavy reading. So I was hoping to find a little bit of balance here. The other one that I have from Morocco is Sex and Lies. This is a nonfiction essay collection that I believe is fairly feminist in nature. Okay, now we're going to be moving on to Libya. This is The Bleeding of the Stone. And this is about a lone Boudin who knows where this certain type of wild sheep is found, and people come and ask to like go to this sheep, and kind of his story. It says this story of confrontation between this Boudin and the two hunters combines pertinent ecological issues with a moving portrayal of desert life and the power of the human spirit to resist. Sounds very interesting. Okay, moving on to Egypt, we have another one that I own. This is God Dies by the Nile. This is a feminist classic. I've had it on my list for quite a while. It made the rounds a few years ago on BookTube and was like really beloved, although people might have been reading her other major work. So I'm excited to read this. Another one that I have from Egypt is Shubeik, Lubeik. This is a modern graphic novel, and I don't really read a lot of graphic novels, but this looked interesting. I saw this in Sajid at Books Are My Social Life's channel. This was in his top reads of 2024, so I added it to my list then. Okay, we're gonna go kind of into Western Africa and start at Senegal. So I have God's Bits of Wood. This is a classic, and this takes place during the Dakar-Niger Railway strike. And then another one that I have is Precolonial Africa, and this is nonfiction. Okay, moving to the Ivory Coast, we have Aya, which I believe is a graphic novel. And then we have In the Company of Men, which also made the rounds on BookTube a few years ago. This is a modern book. This, I believe, was nominated for the Man Booker in translation, and also looks very interesting. Okay, then we're moving on to Ghana. I have for this a classic, The Blinkards and the Anglo. This is supposed to be very humorous and satirical. Okay, the next country is Togo, and this is an African in Greenland. This is a memoir of an African man who just read something or saw something about Greenland and decided he wanted to go there, and then it's his journey making it there. Okay, and then we're gonna move to Nigeria. So Nigeria is where I feel like a majority of books that I have read or heard of or are on my TBR from Africa are out of. For the ones that I don't own, The Half God of Rainfall is a fantasy novel, and Dead Corpse is a horror novel. And then we're gonna move into ones that I own that are classics. People of the City, which I believe is kind of humorous. The Voice. This says is one of the most important experiments there has been at reconciling African tradition and language with the European form of the novel. And then The Palm Wine Drinkard. Amos Tutuola, if I'm saying that correctly, is an author that has a lot of books, and I haven't read from him before. So I think that this is also humorous. I'm not sure though. Okay, now we're gonna move on to Cameroon, starting with a book that I don't own. That is a contemporary fiction, How We Were Beautiful. This is like an environmental crisis fiction, and I have read from this author before and enjoyed it. And then this one is a classic, Mission to Kala, which is also supposedly humorous. It sounds like a lot of these books are humorous, but I feel like there's going to be a lot of dark themes throughout the text that I'm reading. We're going to move to the Congo, mainly nonfiction for this one. So the first one is Cobalt Red, How the Blood of the Congo Powers Our Lives. I've started this one. It's talking about the mining of cobalt, which is used in batteries. And basically charges all electronics that you use from a day-to-day basis. So like I'm recording on a microphone, I have a camera, and I have a computer, and all of those would not work potentially without cobalt. Okay, the next one is like, I think I would a little bit more US focused, but US and African, I don't even want to say relations necessarily, but the Lumumba plot, The Secret History of the CIA and a Cold War Assassination. And then the other one from the Congo that that is fiction that I want to read is Broken Glass. I read the Memoirs of a Porcupine from this author a few years ago, and it made it to my favorites list of that year, so I'm excited to try another book from that author. Moving to Sudan, we have Season of Migration to the North. This is following a character who spends time in Europe and then returns to his home village and has to contend with that culture clash and identity crisis. Okay, and then we're going to move to Kenya. The first one I don't own is Decolonizing the Mind. I read a fiction book by this author. I have another fiction book by this author, but in this, he's talking about the decolonization of the mind via language and a discussion around language. If I remember correctly, although this could be a different one of his books, he wrote it while he was being imprisoned, but that could be the other book I own, Devil on the Cross. So I'm very excited to read that. It's nonfiction. And then the other one that I don't own that is also nonfiction is The Worlds of a Maasai Warrior, an autobiography. For the one that I own, Ripples in the Pool. So it says, in this powerful and densely symbolic novel, tragedy spreads out in every direction. It sounds like there's this pool and that symbolizes something. I'm assuming some like a colonial influence. Overall sounds really interesting. Moving to Rwanda, we have two nonfiction, A Boy Called Hippo, which is a memoir that takes place in part during the Rwandan genocide, and then Do Not Disturb, the story of a political murder and an African regime gone bad. So I think that's a nonfiction that talks about events that happen after the Rwandan genocide. Okay, moving down the map a little bit to Zimbabwe. This is a very popular book, Nervous Conditions. I don't really know what it's about, and the back doesn't really tell me, but it's like a little bit more modern. And then my last book, we enter South Africa for a memoir called Down Second Avenue. So this book describes the author's experience growing up in apartheid South Africa. And those are all the books that I put on this list, but I honestly had like a way bigger list that I attempted to narrow down. I tried to get a variety of locations. I tried to get a variety of classics and modern and nonfiction. I tried to get a variety of themes and like plots. And yeah, I'm excited to kind of dive into these this year. I don't really expect to read all of them. I also don't really know how I'm planning to kind of discuss these books on my channel, since I don't really do like wrap-ups anymore, but maybe I'll do more focused wrap-ups around the books that I'm reading for this 2025 reading adventure I'm doing. But that is all I got for this video, so until next time, happy reading.